Hey everybody, it's November 1st, and I am doing another verse of the day. This is a shirt from my work, Dominate Illuminate, so it's not like an ad for anything. Anyway, today's verse is 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And the verse says, "We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture the rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ." So 2 Corinthians is um, it's a letter, obviously, from Paul to the church in Corinth. And it's like such a. I mean, it's a great letter in the sense that what he's speaking about, and he's really, I mean, he's kind of coming down on the Corinthians a lot for their uh, what's the right word for it? Like so much arrogance, but they just had this mindset about them. Um, and they dismissed Paul for who he was. He became, Paul, once getting, fully accepting Christ, coming into the ministry, he gave up like everything he had. He became poor. He dedicated his life to the ministry. He didn't have this high and mighty. He didn't work to obtain status amongst people. Even though he was an apostle and he knew Christ, he didn't walk around with the title of apostle and carry it as like I'm trying to say, it just didn't elevate him above other people. So the whole letter's kind of talking about this, and Paul's writing to them about really teaching, helping understand the foundation of who Christ is, and getting them back into, imploring them to get back into what Christ is calling you to be. He's not calling you to look again for status, and so there's a lot of Paul in the earlier chapters is writing a lot about that. So chapter 10, again, when you read the Bible, depending on your version, but mine is, again, New Living Translation, there's little subheads. And this one is called Paul Defends His Authority. And he's kind of saying, so it kind of falls back into what was going early in the chapter. And even in verse 1, he's saying, "Though I realize you think I am timid in person and bold only when I write from far away." So they didn't see Paul as a strong leader. They just saw him more as like, they even started questioning like his authority in the church. And he's like, "I set up this church." But anyway, to get onto this verse, there's the verses before that kind of talk about, he's talking about the spiritual, this warfare that we as humans participate in when it comes to with the spiritual war fighting. He's saying we don't use weapons that, you would generally use in warfare. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and destroy false arguments. That's verse 4. So to go back to verse 5, it's again showing that this battle we're fighting is not one, and this is another verse, is not one of flesh and blood, this regarding spiritual warfare, but it continues on this motif of we are not fighting things that we can see. We're not fighting this in this battle. It's not physical. And so when he's speaking here, there's other ways in which we have spiritual warfare, but this way is the warfare that's going on in the mind. So and he's speaking about, so we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. So this sense of haughtiness that we even get to ourselves, even as Christians, we begin to think, oh, well, our thinking, we know better than God. Whether that's intentional, like you specifically say, I know better than God, or I know more than this God you speak about, or it's unintentional that, my way of thinking makes more sense than what the Bible is saying. I can trust in more what I'm doing. So we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture the rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. And that's in the New Living Translation. So the whole point is to get our mindset under the authority of Christ and in obedience to what Christ teaches us. And again, it goes into this whole thing that I've kind of been talking about over the past couple verses of the day, is this getting out of this mindset of, inward thinking, uplifting, things that would separate us from God, things that would separate us from the love of God, things that separate us from knowing who He is, these ideas that we have, and getting our mind, you know what, Lord, help me to be, my mind to be in line with what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're speaking, so I can fully be in line with you. And so my mindset and my mind is in obedience to you. I rely upon you. I look to you, only to you, for life and salvation. And that when I do these things, it's from a cheerful heart. It's not one that I'm just, so when we're saying we destroy every proud obstacle and we capture rebellious thoughts, those things that begin to get into our mind, that we're saying, God, we're not allowing our mindset to go into these places that are going to deter us from following you. Because then, it also comes from knowing, where did I come from? So where I came from before is opposite of who you are today and what you've called me to. So I'm not going to revert or even go back to those rebellious thoughts that would keep me from knowing you. And it's, so yeah, it's a really good verse, and it speaks to so much more that what Paul is speaking about in general to the church in Corinth. And I think if you look at it in that context, it illuminates it so much more, and it speaks to who we are today as people. And if you are a Christian, it speaks to, again, that mindset that we can get. Like, he's not just this letter is not just to like people who are unsaved. It's to the church. It's to those who are saved, who know Christ. And he's really just getting them, like, I'm not going to boast about the authority. I'm not going to boast about who I am. I'm not going to boast about too much just about the authority God gave to me. So, it's like Paul's just, it's such a good letter, because Paul is just really speaking about helping them understand it's not about the status of who I am. So these things that we begin to think and believe and feel that are going to lift us up, these things are going to get us out of Christ's will, out of his obedience for him, because we're going to begin thinking about ourselves and how we lift up ourselves, and does it fit in line with what we're doing? And it's no longer, does it fit in line with what Christ is doing? So I hope this verse blesses you. I hope you guys get something from it. Again, if there's anything you guys hear or think that's like, oh wow, that's crazy good, or I read this, or I thought this when I read it, please share it with me, even if it's just a link. I'll read it. But yeah, I'm excited to see what tomorrow's verse is. So we'll talk to y'all later.